Okay, so welcome back to Bar Talk 2023. Today's September 14th, and we have some special guests with us to talk about the business climate in Maine. I'm Angela Armstrong, the Executive Director, for those of you who may not know that. I do have a few things to share before we get going here. Can you see my screen? So particularly want to hit up on the MSBA updates. So membership renewal is now open again. It opens about September 5th. You can sign into your online account and renew your dues. We hope you do that within the next month or so. We have a new program coming up, CompCon 2023, used to be run workers' compensation convention. Used to be run by a different entity, but they stopped doing it. So the Bar Association is attempting to take over the reins on that. This year is kind of a bit of a test run for us, but things are coming together well, and it looks like we're going to have a full house. The BOG, the Board of Governors nominating petition, just went out to membership today. There are seats that are up that are available. And this would be effective for a 2-year term starting January 1st of 2024. If you have an interest or someone you know has an interest in running for the board, those forms would be due to me by October 1st. And once this slide is posted to our once it's posted to the website after we're done with this, you'll be able to link to all of these things right here from the slide. And then of course I've got a few save the dates. I'm not going to read those, but again, thank you all for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Thanks, Angela. And yes, as Angela said, welcome back to our after summer break to our next edition of Bar Talk. And for those of you who might not know me, my name is Stacy Stipem, and I am president of the Maine State Bar Association, at least for another couple of months. With us today, we have some very special guests, and we're thrilled to have them. And more importantly, they're not all lawyers, which is even more exciting. So we have 3 guest panelists today to talk about, as I mentioned, the business climate in Maine. We have Mike Mahoney, who's Chief Legal and Compliance Officer at LL Bean. In addition to legal and regulatory compliance issues, Mike also oversees the company's internal audit, factory compliance, corporate security risk, and sustainability team. And prior to joining LL Bean in 2016, he co-led boutique law and government affairs firms in Augusta for nearly a decade after serving as chief legal counsel to former Governor John Baldacci. Thrilled to have Mike and his insights with us today. Also with us, we have Catharine Mclaren, who is the Vice President of Talent and Diversity for Northern Light Health, overseeing recruitment and training and development. She's also an adjunct instructor for Northeastern University's College of Professional Studies and has a small private mental health counseling practice apparently in her free time, which I can't imagine she has much of. Catharine is the past president of the board of directors of the Human Resources Association of Southern Maine, and also thrilled to have Catharine and her expertise on our panel today. And last but certainly not least, we have Emily Schorer, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer for the Jackson Laboratories, more commonly known as JAX, an independent nonprofit biomedical research institution founded in Bar Harbor. Based in Maine, Emily oversees the people and culture strategy for JAX's global operations and leads a team of HR professionals distributed across the country and in Asia. Prior to joining JAX, Emily was a senior vice president for Cape Cod Healthcare and spent most of her career at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, where she last served as chief administrative officer. So we have a wealth of talent on our panel today to talk about Maine's future and current business climate, and look forward to hearing from them. As always, our format will be that I will ask a couple questions of our panelists, but I certainly encourage any of you who have questions to type them into the chat box, and Angela will keep monitoring those, and certainly we'll have a chance at the end of my questions for any of you to ask any questions that you like for that chat feature. So If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and Angela will keep an eye on that for us. So to get us started this afternoon, I will put Mike on the hot seat first. And Mike, I wanted to ask you, what do you personally see as the biggest operational challenges facing employers in the next few years to decade?
Sure, Stacey, and thank you for having me on. It's awesome to be part of the program today. And I'll just apologize at the outset that I'm fighting a bit of a cold, so if my voice gives out on me, that's the reason why. I really can only look at that through that kind of question through Bean's lens, and the industry we're in. I certainly can't speak for the folks in healthcare or at Jackson Lab by any stretch. But the challenges that we look at least initially in my world, are things like a significant cyber incident, the supply chain challenges that we've experienced in the last couple of years. There's always the threat of a public relations crisis that could sidetrack customer sentiment around our brand. And then there's things like the catastrophic losses at our fulfillment centers. Those are the biggies for us. Of course, being in a customer-facing business, we're always concerned about just sort of changing customer sentiment, and it doesn't have to be massive for us to have a significant impact. If it's a 10 or 15% impact on the business, that's significant. That's a game changer for a company like L.O. Bean that's sort of as established as it is. And I don't want to go out on too far of a limb here, especially in the first 7 minutes of our call. But for a brand that is based on cold weather and the holidays, and that's part of our DNA, climate is a concern. We were just in a call this morning going through all of our creative content for the upcoming holiday season, and there are photo shoots of people in our apparel and using our gear that are in snow and in winter wonderland scenes, and the question was asked, most of our customers aren't going to see snow this winter, and that's just because of the changing climate. And so how do we adapt as a brand? How do we capture as much of the cold weather customer base as we can, and how do we adapt for the customers that are no longer in those areas that are going to have that extreme cold weather? And we do that through our products and through our marketing. But so in kind of a big picture way, climate is a definite factor in our business planning.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate hearing those insights, and never occurred to me sort of the impact that climate could have on a business like L.O. Bean's, but that makes perfect sense. Catherine and Emily, I know you're coming at this from a slightly different background and obviously in different industries. I'd love to hear your views about what are the biggest challenges facing Maine employers. And let's start with Catherine as to anything to add or comment on following up on Mike's response.
Sure. Yeah. And, I can speak from the healthcare perspective, which I'm sure most of has been challenged for a number of years now, not just in Maine, but, nationally. Certainly cybersecurity issues and supply chain have been concerns and will continue to be. Talent, finding the qualified talent to do the work, which is directly related, of course, to access for patients. As we live in a pretty rural state. And so one of the things that we're grappling with quite a bit is what's the best way to make healthcare accessible to people in a way that they will use it and, get the care that they need. I would say one of the other things that's challenging, you're probably all aware, of course, that most of the organizations in Maine are very small. We represent, the three of us, some of the bigger organizations, which is, probably nice for us in some ways. I certainly appreciate it. I have a lot of, friends and acquaintances who run small businesses, and that talent crunch has been especially impactful for them because there are whole areas that they, would normally be, have work being done and that just aren't being done because it's one person and they can't find the one person for that role. The other thing that just comes to mind, and then I'll stop because I could talk about this for hours and I won't, but is that we are experiencing a lot more workplace violence than we ever have before. And it's something I think about a lot because I am a therapist, sort of trained, and I came out of the mental health or behavioral health world to move into this role. But, people just seem to have, and I'm interested in your experiences, but lower frustration tolerance than perhaps I was seeing 5 years ago. And when you have people in really stressful situations in healthcare, which is inevitable, on some level, there's a lot of that coming out. So there are people who have decided to pivot out of healthcare into other industries for completely legitimate reasons. And so that is also a challenge.
Yeah, I think for us at Jack, certainly the biggest challenge, what keeps me up at night, is recruitment and retention. We're already feeling this challenge, and unfortunately, I don't see it changing anytime soon. The work we do at Jack's, as you can imagine, biomedical research, animal care, we breed thousands of different types of mice for biomedical research that are used by labs around the world. This work relies on people, and in the current environment, it's been really difficult to stay on our growth trajectory with the shrinking labor force. I think while the population in Maine, we've all read some of the articles about how it's increased in recent years, mainly through migration. The labor force population has actually seen a steady decline over the last decade, and today, I think approximately 44% of the population in Maine is age 55 or older, and that's compared to 37% nationally. And then also concerning is, starting in 2013, the birth rate in Maine has been surpassed by the death rate. So very acute for us. We are definitely feeling it. This is something that's been predicted for a long time by those of us who are in the field of HR. I think going back even 20 years, they were saying that there's going to be a time where there were more jobs than there were workers to fill, and certainly COVID has accelerated that. But we're definitely feeling the challenge and taking a look at our operations and how we can focus in on retention of our workforce so that we can sustain our operations in Maine.
That's great. And Emily touches on a question I would love to follow up with you on. So the nature of your work obviously takes you outside of Maine, within Maine. I assume that some of these recruitment and retention challenges that you're talking about are particularly zeroed in on Maine, although they may be prevalent elsewhere. They may be more acute in Maine. How have you sort of risen to meet the recruitment challenge at Jack's? What kind of efforts are you trying to get folks to come here and to stay here once they do come?
Well, that too has been a challenge. We've definitely been investing a lot. I'd say one of the biggest obstacles in getting people to come to Maine, or even like move to our location in Maine, has been affordable housing. In 2018, in Bar Harbor, the median price of a house was $311,000 in 2018. Today, the median price is $625,000. And then the inventory here is quite low. So last September, we actually cut the ribbon on a new workforce housing complex in Bar Harbor, which consists of 24 units. Of course, that filled up almost immediately, and we've now got a waiting list. So that investment and the effort helps, but it hasn't really fully addressed the challenge. And we're trying to think of new ways of how we can partner with the community, provide access for employees and potential recruits to resources to help them with this. We're going to be opening up a new childcare center on site this year as well, too, to help attract families and provide an additional level of support. We also offer subsidized transportation from areas like Bangor, but Bangor is, about an hour away from where we are. And while it's great that we're able to provide that services, that type of a commute also makes it difficult to hold on to people. But we're continuing to, talk to our employees, talk to potential candidates, see what's important to them right now and how we can best meet their needs. And we are ready to make some investments in that. But again, it's still, it's definitely still a challenge.
Well, I did read about the new child care facility and applauded your efforts on that. I think that's a great step. Catherine, I certainly know that Northern Light, based on the geographic spread of where you are, probably encounters a lot of rural communities and the difficulties in keeping or attracting professionals to rural communities and keeping professionals in rural communities, something that the Bar Association has been struggling with as well. What challenges have you seen in this area, and what efforts is Northern Light going through to try to attract professionals and keep them?
Yeah, so of course, housing and childcare, rise to the top of the list, as Emily mentioned, and I'm delighted that Jax has, made that commitment for housing. We talk about it; it's a big endeavor, and our footprint is from South Portland up to Presque Isle, out to Greenville, and then to Blue Hill. So it's a pretty big, with 10 hospitals. Some areas more rural than others. We have I would say about 100 international nurses working with us right now. And we're making a big commitment to support them and their families to stay, because for a variety of reasons, housing being a big one, but, sense of community being another. There are good reasons for people to leave once they've spent their time with us. I know that we recruit out of state, of course, and we're always, thinking about that employer value proposition, and also, leveraging life in Maine, which those of us who live here, I think for the most part, really appreciate and can talk about. I will say that we have had people who were very interested in positions, and for a position where one would consider moving, but when it came down to it, they couldn't find housing and they had to decline. So we take a sort of three-pronged approach: recruitment, retention, and then we put a lot of emphasis on growing our own. So what we talk to people about is, yes, we have this position that you are qualified for and you might be interested in, but here are all the things that we will do to help you grow if that's important to you. And it is important to a good portion of the population. And here's how we will do that. And here are the opportunities that we can give you as a larger organization. I'm very grateful that we have the ability to do that. That sort of opportunity for growth is one where we've gotten good traction around both recruitment and retention, but it will continue to be a challenge.
And I assume a challenge that manifests in slightly different ways, since unlike Jax, you are less concentrated. So you're not trying to bring people to the same place, but bringing people to 10 or more offsite places.
Yeah, I mean, I probably won't be shocking to anyone that it's much easier for us to recruit a new grad RN to Mercy in Portland than it is to Presque Isle, to AR Gould. It's, it depends on the person. I talked to a new grad recently who said, I've always wanted to live near Acadia National Park. And I was like, fantastic. Like, that's great. But, we get lots of people want to live in Portland. And so when you move out of that, there are people who are certainly interested. And we one more thing, we're just starting a sort of residency with physician assistants from Morehouse College. They're going to come up and do a lot of practical work with us because they're very interested in rural healthcare. And so we are starting to partner more with organizations outside of Maine to bring students here within the hopes that they'll, grow to love it as much as we do and want to stay.
So Mike, I understand obviously that El Albino is a little bit closer to Maine's urban center, but have you seen since the start of the pandemic or in the last 10 years, some difficulties in retaining and keeping employees, or recruiting and keeping employees? And you're on mute, Mike.
Thanks, Stacy. Sorry about that. Yeah, and it comes in a couple of different flavors. So our year-round workforce is about 5,000, but for the holidays, for what we call peak season, we need to double to about 10,000. And those jobs are primarily in the fulfillment center and stores and in our call center. So there certainly are challenges in meeting those demands year after year. The call center jobs have become the easiest and quickest to fill because we have now outfitted all of our call center reps to work from home. And so people really appreciate that flexibility. So long as there's reliable broadband, we can set you up really from anywhere in Maine. And so that has been a little bit easier, but certainly the other jobs are more challenging. You know, we'd like to think that the benefits that we can provide to those seasonal employees will keep them coming back year after year. We recently went to a $16 minimum wage. We have obviously other benefits, the employee discount, et cetera. So that has been, we've had a really solid year after year seasonal workforce. In terms of the year-round workforce, there are challenges and there are opportunities, and you've certainly heard the challenges already, and I don't want to repeat those. The opportunities for us really are in that hybrid space. So there are folks who are highly talented that we would love to have come work for LL Bean. They may not be quite ready to pick up and move to Maine. And you know, a lot of us on the call, that's a head scratcher because we love Maine. But for some people, it's a big move. And so the ability to bring those people in a largely remote or hybrid kind of model has been helpful. Now, at the same time, there have been folks who we've had for a long time that we lost because they were lured away by companies that are based elsewhere that may be able to have a higher compensation, but still allow them to live in Maine. And so in some ways, it kind of all comes out in the wash, but it has been helpful and taken some of the restraints off us to be able to offer remote or hybrid positions to really talented people. So there's pros and cons.
Great. And I suspect you've already touched on the answer to this question, but it leads me to a follow-up and kind of let's zeroing out from recruitment and retention. I'm curious just generally how you think workplace culture has changed for LL Bean since the pandemic. So obviously we all had a sea change in 2020. It really changed the way we work and the way we run our business. And I'm just curious as to your thoughts about how workplace culture has changed, maybe which changes have been positive, which ones maybe less positive, and whether you think those changes are here to stay.
Yeah, I think there are positives and negatives that have certainly come out of the pandemic and the change. One thing we noticed early on when we were in this Zoom Teams format is there was a bit of a democratization of voices whenever we were having a discussion. There weren't the limitations on who could be in the room, who would be invited to the meeting, who would speak. Everybody, in some way had a square, and we on the leadership team were able to be exposed to a much broader group of really talented people and hear some great voices. So in some ways, it provided that real opportunity. We, like I'm sure Northern Lights and Jax and the companies and firms that are represented on this call, have since then worked hard to try to sort of reestablish some of the in-person connectivity that was lost during the pandemic. We have spent a lot on food, and it has been helpful. And we're just finishing up a big cornhole tournament, and any little thing that can help bring people together in a positive way and get those connections reestablished. As I mentioned just before the call, we don't have a policy on the books in terms of time in the office. It's really kind of organic. So we want to make sure that we want to use the office as we call it the magnet, not the mandate, and use it as a draw. So I think we're having some success there, but we're settling in. There are lots of great folks that have I think gotten used to working remotely during the pandemic, and we're all sort of accommodating whatever style everybody has and trying to stay productive and close to as a team. So
That's good to hear. And certainly I feel like I should be dropping by on some of those free food days, but
yeah.
follow up offline with that. Emily, I'd love to hear about how you think workplace culture at Jack's has changed since the pandemic, and whether you think some of those changes were temporary or if they're largely here to stay.
Yeah, I think, well, similar to Mike's experience, I joined Jack's in the spring of 2020. So right when we were sending everybody home. And at that time, Jax's US-based workforce was centered around our physical campuses located in Maine, Connecticut, and California. And while the majority of our workforce population continues to be tied to those 3 sites, today we actually have employees who live and work from more than 35 states across the country. So while Mike and LL Bean are spending money on food, we're spending a lot more money on travel, really trying to be very intentional about bringing groups together. We have told our organization, our employees, that we do not aspire to be a fully remote organization, but we are committed to going forward as a hybrid organization. And that requires an investment and some effort by all of us. And so often you will hear, like I will bring my whole team, which is located across the country. And as you said in the beginning, in Asia as well, too, for some offsite retreats occasionally, just so that we can all come together and have that in-person interaction. And a lot of other groups across the organization do that as well. But culturally, I mean, it really requires, we've often talked about one Jack's and making sure that even though we've got different campuses and subcultures naturally crop up from that, we've tried to make sure that we deliver and nurture and maintain a common culture as an undercurrent across the organization. And now when you add in the factor of having fully remote employees, not just being fully remote in Maine, but being fully remote in New York, Texas, Wisconsin, anywhere you can think of, it really does add a different dynamic to how that culture evolves over time. And then also something we experienced at Jack's when I said that we're in the United States, China, and Japan, it was only during those years, the pandemic years, actually, that we started a joint venture in China and we acquired our facilities in Japan. So all of that has happened since 2020, but we're truly a global organization now. And so culturally, we're trying to grow into that footprint and strengthen our muscle in what it means to manage a global organization in that regard. I think going forward, as we look at the future, our people strategy and planning for the next decade is really focused on explicitly paving a way for a modern work environment that goes beyond just embracing remote and hybrid work models. We're looking at things like how, when, and where work is done, improving our ability to scale with our continued plans for growth, and really taking a thoughtful look at what employees are looking for in their work experience today, and seeing what we can do to deliver on that.
Great. And Catherine, you obviously have some limitations on people's ability to work remotely, given the types of services you provide, but I'd also love to hear how you think that the workplace operations and culture have changed since the pandemic, and whether those changes are here to stay or just temporary.
Yeah, so I'll echo what actually, Mike, you made me laugh because our home office for Northern Light Health is in Brewer. If you're on 395 headed out to Bar Harbor, you'll see it sort of up on the left. And that is officially, I work for home office, although I'm based in Portland, and I went up on Friday because we had a employee appreciation barbecue, and I drove into the parking lot and I thought, I have not seen this parking lot this full in years. I mean, but thankfully people came out, and it was great to see some people I hadn't seen in years in person, right? I see a lot of people virtually. Our appetite for remote work increased significantly, which has then increased our ability to recruit more out of state for people to work perm remote. I will say the one challenge about that, so it sort of broadens the pool, but the challenge about that is that, let's say hypothetically, you're talking to someone for a position that's based in Brewer or Bangor, Maine, who lives in Chicago and wants to do that job remotely, you now have to talk about pay scale and what their expectations are for where they're living versus what, you know, the sort of internal equity and what, so that's a sort of a whole new world for us. But especially as telehealth and you know, the other thing I'll say about our culture that I have seen is a whole renewed emphasis. It's always been important to us, but and I've been here almost 17 years now. I used to oversee our employee assistance program, and then I moved into more of the organizational development. Real focus on wellness and, you know, mental health and support. And I think I'm sorry about sort of what triggered it or what feels like was the what kicked it off, but I'm so glad that we have really looked at everything that we offer and how we sort of holistically support our employees, their families, and also our patients, and don't just look at the medical piece of it, because all of these other pieces really impact that. So yeah, I think the other thing, by the way, and I don't think you'll be surprised by this, and I'm sure this happened in other industries, but you know, is that we all had to like very quickly get on the same page about what we were doing to react to COVID, because we were, you know, we were providing the care. And as really stressful and challenging as that was, I think what it did is it gave us an opportunity to see how well we could work together. Like, you know, if we sort of put some of the other stuff that can get in the way to the side and really focused. And so we're really trying to leverage that now and move forward, understand, like we proved it to ourselves. So it's not a question of like, can we do this better? You know, like, how do we sustain that and keep moving forward with all feeling like we're all rowing in the same direction with patient care at the center.
Yeah, you know, I think all of the things you're talking about really resonate, you know, with law firms as well. And first of all, having done attorney recruitment, it's a totally different world where you have, you know, your great talented associate who wants to move to Maine, but they can move to Maine and still work for Skadden Arps in New York for way more money than I made. So I mean, you get to a point where, you know, you're really seeing the challenges of the kind of flattening of people can work everywhere. And certainly keeping cohesiveness while people are working remotely or hybrid or from different locations is a challenge. We do have some questions from the audience here that I just want to ask before our time is up. So you mentioned, you know, at least with LLB and Jax, you have employees who are starting, who want to work for the company but aren't ready to maybe move or work in different locations or what have you. And the question from the audience is, you know, do you facilitate that by actually providing workstations? Is it challenging to manage payroll or employment laws when you have folks working out of state? So what are the sort of benefits to that and challenges that you see? And I'll just leave that as a jump ball for whoever might want to take it.
It's very challenging, I can say. You know, we're just wrapping up updating our employee handbook, for example, and it's got so many, you know, we've tried to keep it as common as possible with a whole bunch of addendums based on the different states. But again, I think our day-to-day experience in managing the workforce has changed dramatically. There's so much more that we need to think about and consider even when we're looking to just make slight changes in policy or programs. It's not just thinking about, okay, what's going on in Maine or Connecticut, or even Connecticut and California is like a separate country when you think about employment law, which has always been a challenge. But when you add in a bunch of other things to the mix, we've really had to be on our toes on that. But as far as the office space, we have gone to hoteling space as well too. So really having to take a look at our space needs. In fact, we're going through an update of our master plan now, thinking about what we call workplace of the future and making sure that we are looking at our space allocation in a more meaningful, thoughtful way about, you know, and designing it in a way to actually encourage and bring people together, not to sit in front of a Zoom meeting to go in their office, but to come together and collaborate and interact on a social basis. The in-person physical workspace is really being used for that social aspect and less for kind of heads down work. They can do that work from home easily enough. But we really want to bring them together for that. And I think going back to what Catherine was saying about pay and what you said, Stacy, one of the other things that we did this year is we did implement a geographic pay scale. So now we have 3 pay scales, and depending on some, there's a whole statistical model that we do for this, depending on what state you're in, where we place you into one of those, the scales. All the job grades are the same, but the pay ranges differ depending on the scale, because we wanted to even it out. We didn't, we did see a little bit of gaming going on as far as people assigning folks to different campuses with higher pay. So really trying to do some level setting there.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is super tactical. When it became apparent that we were going to be remote for an extended period of time, and travel restrictions started to lift, the idea was a bit of irrational exuberance, I think, on the part of some of our workforce, thinking, oh, geez, I've always wanted to live in Europe, and why don't I can work and live in Europe. I can get up, I can stay up late and work, or go to live near my grandkids in California. So we did have to sort of tap the brakes on that, and we actually have kind of a green, yellow, red system of places, by state or by country, where yes, no problem, there's a little bit, we've got to be mindful of this, or a place like California where we say it just isn't practical for us to comply just with all the California laws, just for a very small number of people. So we kind of have that green, yellow, red system.
Yeah, don't even get me started on California laws. Catherine, anything that you'd like to add to that, or is that?
I think most of it's been said, but I would say California is our no-fly zone too. I mean, we just all my recruiters know that's related, Emily, to what you were saying, we have sort of this running joke with the legal HR team that works on the different state, like, oh, we now have an employee in Illinois or wherever, or we have 3 here, that whenever someone decides that they're no longer want to be at Northern Light Health, what they should do is start a business that just surrounds all the laws everywhere and can be like that one-stop vendor, because we have so many people from the payroll to the HR to the just general employment law with their hands in this, trying to stay on top of it. So for any of you who are interested, that may be a business venture, because we're all grappling with it, right? As everyone can go towards more virtual opportunities, most of the people I know across the country, friends, are in organizations that are really starting to expand their footprint in terms of where their employees are located.
Great. Well, I think that is it for our questions, and we've gone over our time because this is so fascinating. But I just want to thank our guests again, Mike, Catherine, and Emily. You've been terrific panelists and given us a lot to think about. And not just the free food and the free travel, but everything else. It's really been great hearing from you and getting your perspective and seeing some commonalities between the problems that your industries are facing and certainly the legal profession is as well. Angela, thanks as always for putting this on, and I think that's the end.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Stacy. Bye-bye.